The female lead tells women's stories. Remarkable, diverse, inspiring. An educational charity promoting positive female role models who show the many different routes to success and fulfillment.
So often I hear people saying, oh, how do I get started? How do I do this? How do you do it? You just start. You have to begin. And it won't be perfect and it'll be messy and it'll be hard, but you're doing something and you're on your way.
Empowering future generations of women through films and a book of 60 women donated to 18,000 schools in the UK and USA, reaching millions of young people. And through our female lead societies, we help girls to discover new role models that speak to their passions, ambitions and careers. Through our research into social media and mental health, we found a solution to the negative impact of social media on teen girls. Through a simple intervention which encouraged girls to follow different influencers, we were able to change their entire social media experience and sense of well-being. We called this campaign Disrupt Your Feed, and it reached 20 million people on social, with 330 million impressions all over the globe. So what's next? As well as inspiring girls, we're now finding ways to measurably improve the lives of older women through data, research, and the stories of those who have overcome challenges and found their own personal versions of success. We're a long way from being finished. Join us in our mission.
Are we going to talk about women's rights again? Yes, we're going to talk about it until there's balance.
Hello everyone, welcome to our new series of LinkedIn Lives. Here we are, middle of January. I would like to wish you all a happy new year, but I don't really feel we're all at our happiest right now. So I want to wish you instead, from everybody at the Female Lead, a healthier, safer 2021. And let's celebrate all the fantastic scientists out there who are helping us in that direction. I'm Edwina Dunn. I'm founder of the Female Lead, and we are going to be talking about how to reduce stress from quick fix to long-term success. And to do that, I have with me Miriam Robin Linneman. Now, just a few words about Miriam. She's a mental health advocate. She's founder of Honest Talks, and she recently made the move to follow her dreams as a coach, hypnotherapist, and educator. Her mission is to empower others to love themselves and their lives. So in that process, and I think we're going to hear some of this, she's had some of her own challenges that she's going to share with us. And she's developed some tools that she has also volunteered to share with us, which you can find on her website. We'll remind you of that later in the session. Do please think of questions. Do please share your questions. And after I've had a little time with Miriam, I'll come to those and ask your questions. So, Miriam, let me introduce you. Welcome to the Female Lead.
Thank you.
Miriam, so let me ask you to kick off here. I know that mindsets and the power of the mind are always important in these subjects, but let me start with the question, how did your interest in stress and the science behind it begin?
Thank you, Edwina. Thank you for the question. So, I mean, these days I am very enthusiastic about stress. I love talking about it, reading about it, and especially empowering others. But it wasn't always like that. There was actually a time when I was so stressed that I couldn't even protect those I love. So that's back in May 2019. I'm working in a startup job, very high pressure, very high workload, and I've also moved houses recently. So my weeks are kind of 10, 12 hours at the office, and then at the weekend I'm unpacking boxes. And I'm spending very little time with my friends, with my family, and with my cat Tiggy. And then one evening, I come home late, and my cat makes this painful sound and collapses in front of me. And that moment, I know something is seriously wrong. I'd kind of already noticed he was eating less and he was less active and also smelling a bit weird over some days. And I thought, okay, I should have this checked out by the vet. And then kind of work was so intense that I didn't find the time. And I comforted myself thinking, oh, well, some cats adapt badly to change and it's probably just that. And I'll go the week after when it calms down a little bit. And then obviously after that, I went to the vet. I took the next day off. I went there. And so we're in this examination room and she puts Tiggy, my cat, on this table and examines him. And then she looks at him and looks at me and says, your cat had a kidney failure and he lost a lot of weight. And I'm not sure if he's gonna eat again. If you had come just a few days earlier, we could have done so much. Why didn't you come before? And I remember standing there and thinking, I was so busy, I didn't even realize he's dying. And I warned you I would cry about this. I mean, I love him so much. And stress is such a small word. It's such our norm. Oh, I'm so busy. I'm so stressed out. That we don't ever stop to ask ourselves, what's the cost of this? And what I have learned from that experience and feeling that cost is that in a world where overwhelm is the standard setting, we need to be intentional about the life that we are creating. And that my wish and my vision really for each of us is that we get to realize that cost without having to pay it. And Edwina, if our conversation can contribute to that, that would be wonderful.
Well, it is such a sad story, and I do, really feel for you and the fact that you've shared it with us, because there must be, all sorts of other feelings mixed up with that. But I know that you share it as a kind of beginning to a journey and to self-awareness. So,
Exactly.
so from that really low point, Miriam, which I think, at times we've all felt and been through and been sort of disappointed in how we've reacted to something. I mean, that can really, disappointment is quite a long word, but it's also a really heavy one to bear. When we're disappointed with ourselves, it is almost unbearable feeling. How do we build ourselves back up? How do we move from that?
I think, at least for me, and I guess for a lot of other people, the key is forgiveness. I mean, okay, yes, that was actually a terrible feeling. And when I'm telling it, I'm still kind of reliving it in a way. But I've forgiven myself. Like, we do the best that we can based on what we know. And then kind of when we know better, we do better. So I think that's the first step of building up. But then also really going into it and being, okay, where's my responsibility? What can I learn from this? I think that's the most important thing, and also what really helps me to build up. And I think that's where you already need to have have forgiven yourself, to also ask, okay, where's the gift in that situation? For me, it's that I get to share my pain, that others don't have to experience it.
And do you think that it is the expectation setting that we, perhaps don't manage too well? Do we expect too much of ourselves? Where is the science of how you understand whether you are pushing yourself too far, or that somehow we're getting things out of balance?
I mean, the science, there's something very simple also I can explain. It's called the brain in your palm. It's basically, you have this automatic system that's kind of fast, intuitional, but also sometimes very inaccurate. That's like fight, flight, or freeze response that kind of lives in the middle of the brain. And you have the prefrontal cortex that lives in that area. And that's kind of reasoning, decision-making, the kind of self-control that you would be surprised if you see it in a toddler. And basically what happens if we're overwhelmed, it goes like poof. So that's when fight, flight, freeze comes in. And I think where we can see if we're pushing ourselves too hard is, are we still feeling in control of the situation? So are we challenging ourselves? Is it, yes, maybe it'd be stressful, or are we actually not able to manage, for example, to switch off at night, to relax, to enjoy the things we're doing?
And I heard somewhere, and I know, I mean, you're not a scientist, or I don't know, maybe you are a scientist, I don't know, but I heard that sometimes it's very easy to mix excitement up with stress, because in a way our body reacts in quite a similar way. Is that true?
Yes, and I'm so glad that you're mentioning it. That is such a wonderful question, because it actually works both ways. So it can work kind of in a negative way, but it can also work in a positive way. So often we have thoughts that stress us about things, but if it's a positive thing, so let's say giving this presentation, or someone else maybe needs to give a big presentation of our viewers at work, when you feel that fear set in, because fear and excitement are, as you said, they are the same. And then you can actually go, this is my body helping me, and I'm excited. This is wonderful, because your brain kind of listens to what you're saying. And if you go, I'm excited, it goes like, all right, okay, let's do that.
But we want to feel excited. We don't want to feel stressed. So it's that, we want to do enough that we stretch, but not so much that it hurts or other things, get in the way of that sort of balanced life.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, sometimes, just to add to that very quickly, sometimes it may also hurt, like a little bit when we're growing in a good way. I think the difference is how you feel afterwards. If you're feeling really bad afterwards, then it's not growth.
And are you able to share with us, some of the ideas of what triggers there are and what we can do about it to kind of alter our course away from, maybe the negative feelings, more to turning it to positive?
I think triggers, I mean, this is obviously very individual, but I think we all, I mean, especially looking at the current situation, I think we all have very common triggers, like being in a situation which we can't control, which feels kind of insecure. Obviously, it's also worrying when we hear from friends or family that are getting sick. And I think what's very helpful in that kind of situation is to focus on what we can control. Because there is things, like there are triggers, if you try to control them, like if we try to control them, we'll be stressed for the rest of our lives. Like we can't control how our company is doing. We can't, obviously as a business entrepreneur, yes, there is a certain influence, but there's stuff you can't control. And I think that's very important, to focus on the things where we actually do have the influence.
So obviously we're all locked in at home. We're all on Zoom or Teams or StreamYard or whatever it is, talking to each other. And we go, we've sort of now all adjusted, and we now have one meeting after another. And it's almost like, when we were filling the day with meetings. What words of advice can you give about how to, slow it when the pace starts to be uncomfortable rather than just okay? Because there are just moments when you think, I've got to go for a walk, or I've got to blow off steam somewhere. I mean, we all feel that, don't we? What are the kind of things that we can do that might make us feel better and change our mindset?
Yes, I mean, my first advice would be really to listen to yourself and to take those breaks, because very often when we have back-to-back meetings and we go from one to the next, that is very stressful. And I think it's very important to communicate clearly both with yourself and with other people what you need. And then I think there's also, I shared one in advance in the video in our event, where you reaffirm yourself in a positive way. So really thinking, okay, I have phenomenal coping skills. That is a great one, especially if you're in the middle of a stressful situation. And then, since you mentioned the mindset, really to look, okay, how can I learn and how can I grow from this situation? Even if it's challenging at the moment, how will I come out as a better person at the other end of it?
So almost imagining the good things that can come out of something and kind of swallowing up that moment of maybe fear or discomfort, something like that.
Yes, we can. I mean, what I believe is that we can absolutely transform that. And that's also a question of practice. So it's not that may happen. I mean, for some people, it may happen the first time if they're very fast, like when we're fast learners. But for example, for me, I needed to practice that again and again.
And I read from some of the things that you shared in your materials that, change is obviously uncomfortable. Even positive change. So even when we're improving ourselves and getting more resilient, getting stronger, even that can feel uncomfortable. So is it how we feel afterwards that tells us whether the change is good or bad? How do we know we're going in the right direction, so to speak?
I mean, I would say kind of if we look at, are we growing? So what you were saying about how do we know if the change is uncomfortable but necessary, or is the change, or are we actually not making changes? So I think, for example, what I do is that I track when I go to sleep. Like, I have just a paper calendar, but it has boxes where I track it. And that's really how you, like, if you don't measure it, you don't know what's happening. But that's something where we really know that we're growing. And I think also, for example, a brilliant way to see that is to look at our inner dialogues, because a lot of us say stuff to ourselves like, oh, I can't handle the pressure. I'm so stressed out. Like, someone's driving me crazy. Be like, my kids are driving me crazy. And first, when you get the awareness of that inner dialogue, and then you notice that you're changing it to something more positive, that's a very clear sign that you're growing.
Right. Yeah. And you revealed to me that sometimes you talk to yourself under a different name, which I think is really sweet. I mean, there's a technique.
Yes, I would love to share that technique. It's so valuable for stressful times. So actually, I have this, it's a fixed mindset persona. I got this idea from a book called Mindset by Carol Dweck. And she's called Robin because Robin is my middle name. And when I get stressed, and I would say probably so many people watching right now, that then we start also talk to ourselves in a very negative way, like, oh, I'm going to mess this up, or this is all horrible. And what happens these days is when I catch myself having these kinds of thoughts and becoming very stressed, or even just getting stressed in general, I go like, okay, Robin, thank you. I know you're trying to support me. And then I explain to her in a very kind, because that's a part of me, so I'm going to be kind to myself, but I explain to her in a kind way that I know she's trying to help me, but that's not the way we're doing it these days. And that takes also a lot of stress out of you, because then you're kind of in the driver's seat. And I think that's something that everybody can try. And it's also fun.
Sounds really nice that you've got your best friend who's got your best interests at heart right in your head for when you need her and you can call on her. It sounds wonderful. I have never thought about that.
I mean,
it must take practice and time.
yes. I mean, at the beginning, Robin was really this horrible person saying you're going to mess everything up. And then, I mean, that's kind of the fixed mindset, really thinking, okay, I can't do this. I'm not good at this. And then I made her my best friend. And yes, now it's really nice to have this person to be like, look, we're going to do this. And then if she falls back in her kind of old style, I go like, okay, thank you. Not to like, no, that's not how we do it.
Well, it's a lovely idea, I have to say. It's like an imaginary friend for a grown-up, which is, quite an exciting concept. Now listen, I knew this would go so fast, and
Yes.
I haven't asked you half the questions that I wanted to, but it is now time for me to ask people out there, please share your questions, and maybe whilst they're coming through, I think Lauren will share them. You know, if there are any more little hints and tips you can share with us along the way, that would be fantastic.
Wonderful, yes.
Okay, here we go. So if you're stressed about a lot of things and don't know where to start, what do you recommend?
That is a good question, I think, for everybody who's ever felt this stress. I would say start with the smallest first step you can make, and start with what makes the biggest impact. Because if there's like 20 things that are stressing us, we can only do one at a time. And then it's really helpful to say, okay, what would make the biggest difference in my life right now? And actually, what's the really tiniest first step I can do to move towards what I want? And then take it.
Because unpacking lots of those things is sometimes a big job in itself, because they're all messing around all at the same time. Yeah, that's a good help. Yeah. So this is from Katharina. Do you have any exercises to reduce stress?
Yes, I do. I also want to say in the long run, I would really like the best exercise is to change to a growth mindset, because that will just help you handle stressful situations better. So that's where actually the title also came from, about the long-term success. However, I think we need both. We need like the long-term strategies, and I guess the exercises that would call more towards what I would call immediate interventions. So a really great one, I already mentioned it, is saying to yourself, I have phenomenal coping skills. If you say that, I said that to myself today, like I say that daily. And when we do that, it feels so different. Also, what is very helpful is when you have racing thoughts that are not productive and they're also not really on the topic you're working on at the moment, to go, thank you, not now. And if you if you do it like me, you have this kind of person in your head you can talk to, like Robin. So I say, thank you, Robin, not now. That is also good. And then find a time where you can write down all your worries. I did that for a long time, where I actually had my worry time for 15 minutes in the evening, where I could write and think and be stressed about anything else. And also from a previous LinkedIn Live, I actually prepared with this. Amy Yip shared this of sharing the fingertips. So I just want to reiterate that that's such, you remember, Edwina, right? That was brilliant. Yeah. And also what I would...
So remind us, because it's the feeling, isn't it? It's that,
exactly.
It's that awareness of you rubbing those textures together, and it takes your mind off what you're thinking.
Yes, yeah. And I'm doing it right now. I'm like, wow, this is such a calming effect.
Yeah.
And I guess the last exercise, that's not an exercise, but I would say focus also on the basics, like sleep actually exercising in the physical sense, eating properly, mindfulness, because you can have the most beautiful exercises and rub your fingers and breathe. If you like, when we're tired, exhausted, and hungry, we will be stressed.
I have had periods in my career. I mean, I'm a great sleeper. If I can, I like 8 hours a night. So I'm not one of these famous people who doesn't sleep. I love sleep. But there have been times when things worry me. And one of the techniques which you've talked about, but I found really powerful, is writing. So when I wake up and I can't go back to sleep, if I write down all the things I'm worried about, amazingly, when I look at them in the morning, I think, I can do that. I've got plenty of time to do that. And it's so interesting that at night, what you're worried about comes into your brain and it feels almost impossible, doesn't it? But in the morning when you've slept, and I do go back to sleep after I've written them down, it feels better.
Yes, that is so true. And that's actually to do with how our brain works, because in the evening we're often tired and exhausted, and that's when the prefrontal cortex, so that reasoning and logic part, disengages, and we go like, oh my God, this is all going to go wrong. Like, that's the kind of survival circuits speaking. That's literally that.
Amazing. That's so interesting. I didn't know that. Nicola, what would be your top one tip that we can share with our staff team right now to give them a boost? Lovely.
I would say live the best example that you want them to be. So in the sense of caring for self. So take breaks. I mean, yes, you can encourage them and you can give them tips. Like, we can all do that. But when we don't actually live it, it's not going to work. So I would say really switch off, encourage them and do it yourself, like switching off your mobile phone after certain times, saying like, look, 6 or 7 or whatever, like your evening hours when you stop working, that's a cut. And I mean, when you're, for example, a manager, maybe you're not always able to stop then, but you can kind of time your emails. There's a timing feature. So you can time your emails that they don't arrive before 8 in the morning and they don't go out after 6.
I'm really bad at that. You've just shamed me. Yes.
Please be kind. I mean, this is also what I wanted to say also. I mean, I'm glad you're touching on the shame, because often when we're stressed, then also we feel shame for not doing it properly. And I mean, we're all human. And, I think that's just also having that idea of being, okay, well, I can just send that email so they get it the next day. And that, I mean, it's a gradual culture change. And I think we can all give ourselves kindness for doing our best.
Miriam, first I have to learn how to do that. But luckily I know a few people who can show me. I will do that. That's very wise. Do we have another question? Neha, how to handle anxiety and fear if they get initiated by triggers?
Wow. Ooh. I actually know, I mean, I could talk for hours about that one, especially about the anxiety. I think what's the most valuable thing is to realize that anxiety and fear is a story that we made up in our head. That's where it comes from our words. And it's kind of, no one ever told us that we can change that story. So I would say, really, about the anxiety and fear, you need to be aware of your triggers, and then think about what you're going to do in that moment before. Because as I explained about the brain in your palm, when your prefrontal cortex gets poof, we're probably not going to have this great idea how to calm ourselves down. But if you have, for example, if you say, okay, I'm just going to rub my fingertips, or I'm going to tell myself I have phenomenal coping skills, that's going to help.
Well, watch for the warning signs. It's easier to say than to do, but so important. Now, Lauren, do we have time for one more? You're in control. No, I think not. She's not moving on. So guys, I'm so sorry. What an interesting, important conversation. And honestly, Miriam, thank you so much not least for sharing your own fears and, you know, challenges. And that's very gracious, very generous. Thank you so much. We will put your link, your website on the Female Lead for people to go to and find some other of your words of advice and help. So thank you for letting us do that. I just want to mention next week we have another fantastic LinkedIn Live, and we're going to be learning about self-diminishing language. So I think it's the language where we say, I just want a moment of your time and things like that. And that's with Joanne Lauterbach. So that's next week, and that's on the 21st. And we'll see you then. And in the meantime, Miriam, thank you so much for your very generous session.
And thank you, Edwina. It was a real pleasure.